So, um, sensing is really more about the way that you take in information than it is your amount of creativity or imagination or innovation or anything like that. Now, it is true that um, the way that intuitives take in information can sort of lend itself more to new ideas, but it's not across the board that way. So um, that I kind of wanted to point that out because as I look at um, the indicator itself on here, um, it starts out asking very common questions. I think, first of all, the problem I had was like already the third question where it said, "Are you usually a good mixer, quote unquote, or rather quiet and reserved?" And that's already kind of a confusing question. I mean, how do you define a good mixer? I mean, I can mix with certain groups and not with others. So that there's quite a few questions that to me really are just not very well written, and so I took issue with that, but especially the SN questions because that's always what I think leads to when people take this indicator or offshoots of it, what leads to mistyping a lot of times. A lot of SPs, especially, will end up showing up as Ns because they have questions like, do you usually get along better with imaginative people or realistic people? Well, I think the typical SP will probably say imaginative people because that sounds cooler to us. And one thing you have to take into account when it comes to, an indicator such as this is that somebody who's not like me and hasn't kind of really looked at all this stuff and studied it for a while, um, that's a sensor, is not necessarily as self-aware when it comes to this sort of stuff. That's sort of part of, and that aspect of it, you can't really blame Isabel Myers or anybody who determined this for because you can't make someone more self-aware than they are. Um, but the fact is that just by nature of the way that sensors operate, um, we're less likely to examine ourselves from this kind of point of view. Um, and so we're going to likely take questions and answer them very literally and very surface level. So if you ask somebody, you know, if you asked Madonna, for instance, who's been typed as an ESTP by most people, do you get along better with imaginative people or realistic people? I mean, which do you think she would answer? I don't think there's much doubt she would say imaginative. Um, and then let's scroll through here and find some more because I have it here. Oh, would you rather be considered a practical person or an ingenious person? You know, same kind of deal. Ingenious sounds better. Practical is a good thing, but ingenious sounds like something really special. So again, it's something where that doesn't really, somebody answering ingenious in that question does not really indicate that that person is an intuitive in any way. It doesn't really lean them in that direction. So that's another one that I had some trouble with. Another one, are you more attracted to a person with a quick and brilliant mind or a practical person with a lot of common sense? Same deal. Obviously, I'm not going to read the entire thing, even if I wanted to. There might be some legal issues. So I'm not going to do that. Hopefully, don't get in trouble for the amount that I've read so far. But anyway, that's just sort of an example, an idea of the issues I had with some of the actual questions on the indicator. So I probably actually came down too hard on some of the internet versions because I assumed that they distorted it more than they really did. But a lot of the actual indicator itself um, has some of the same flaws. Okay, so I talked about S and N. T versus F, yeah. And J versus P, really both in both cases, I'm about as close to 100% one direction as the other, which, obviously some people could say that that makes me possibly less understanding of the other side on both of those uh, preferences, because I'm so hardcore one way. And you'd probably be right about that. Now, just because I'm not as understanding when it comes to how what it's like to be in someone's head who thinks that way, doesn't mean that I'm prejudiced in a way where I think automatically those people are inferior in some way, or that they're evil, or I have some kind of inherent problem. That's definitely not the case. But it does lead to obviously some misunderstandings, because as I talked about in another video I did, it's hard for me to understand what somebody would live for if they didn't have emotional connections to things and to people. So the people that don't, to me, I have this kind of overwhelming feeling of what really is their purpose in life. And if it's just to survive, or, it's just to get as much just physical pleasure as you possibly can in a life, um, you know, I can sort of understand the second one a little better than the first, because I'm kind of like, if you're just trying to survive, like, well, why? What is it that you accomplish by surviving? I mean, if you don't believe there's anything to be connected to, or anything that really inspires you in any way. But anyway, I have definitely seen the TF disconnect happen many times in my life, um, and it's funny because I've been accused of being like relentless when it comes to arguments. That I find a sore spot or something, and I kind of pick at it and really drive home a particular point. Um, but I'm nothing compared to the T's, to to thinking types. They're always able to do that much better than I am, and because I think there is that disconnect, is that when they're talking to someone, like they can talk to someone and see the argument and the points as being completely separate from the person they're talking to, and focus entirely on the subject and not on the person, unless focusing on the person aids their argument in some way. But it's more like a tool rather than a consideration of the person's feelings or perspective. Whereas I can't not consider the other person's perspective and feelings. It's like so inherent in me to do that, that it sometimes actually stops me from making a point thoroughly, because I feel like if I did so, it could possibly hurt the person. So there are times where it stops me from doing that. And on the J versus P thing, um, a lot of people, when they talk about that particular preference, are like, well, it's oversimplifying to say that J means you're organized and P means you're disorganized. There's not this kind of thing where J's are like all these people who have it together and have their stuff organized, and P's are just the sloppy, messy, everything's out of place, they're late to everything, don't know where they're going, and have no ambition and all this kind of stuff. Now, in my case, all of that's true, but it's not true for everyone that happens to have the perceiving preference. Like I said, being kind of hardcore on both of those last two things, being very much an F and very much a P, I'm kind of the extreme example on some of those things, in terms of how quickly I go, emotionally, am affected by things. And then on the JP thing, how little I care for organization and structure and planning and all that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, there are things that I find useful in organization. But even my version of organization is, I mean, a J would look at as being a horrible mess. To me, just a very basic, like, well, on computers, that's probably the thing I use the most, that has an organization system, because you have folders that have files in them and things like that. Now, I sort of use that in a very rudimentary way, like, oh, well, I need to stick this in a folder so that I've kind of got these things classified for what they are. Like this folder, some of it's like the default stuff when you get a computer. You got a folder that says pictures and one that says videos or whatever the thing is. And I've kind of got these things that are sort of organized for me. But on top of that, I may make certain subfolders or other things like that. But I think probably most J types would look at the way my computer is organized and think it's just horrible. Everything's all out of place and messy and needs to be like, you know, uh, stratified. If I can just pull out a random word there. Um, so anyway, this is another area where I've obviously seen a big disconnect between me and the Jays when I encounter them. Um, is the concept, of organization and schedules and all these kind of things are so different, um, that and it's not a matter of, because some people kind of view it this way. I think the deal is inherently Jays have more of a desire for control. And that doesn't mean that every J preference person is like, well, I want to tell every single person what to do. But there is sort of because you're looking for disorganization or unstructured things and sort of wanting to fix them, there's this kind of habit of trying to do it for other people, and not because you want to assert power over them, although some people might, maybe ENTJs, but it may just be that you're trying to be helpful. You think, well, this person needs some help with their organization or whatever it is, and inherently as P types, because we have this kind of more laid back attitude about all that sort of thing anyway, that's sort of inherent in our nature to be like, whatever you want to, the way you want to do it is fine. We don't have the other way around. So it kind of comes across as there being a lot more J's in the world or in society, because P types don't tend to assert themselves to try to make other people be more like them. I'm not around telling the J's, you need to start throwing your file drawers around and be more disorganized, because I can see that to them there's a value for that, and I'm like, more power to you. Whereas it doesn't seem to happen as much the other way around. J types seem to struggle with how you could possibly live as a P. How you could have all this chaos in your life and still live. And I was kind of being general there in terms of all P's and J's, and I know obviously that temperament plays a big part in that too, in terms of the way you view that, because NFPs or NTPs, while they can come across as very scatterbrained and disorganized in some ways, they still probably in a lot of ways are more forward-thinking or future-thinking than SPs, for instance, SFPs and STPs. We actually like chaos. Not just accept it as a part of life, but seek it out and, embrace it. Chaotic things amuse us, or sometimes give us energy and make us, feel good. So, and that's again like such a foreign concept to people that are hardcore the other way around. Probably SJs most of all just have a real tough time not seeing people who have that mentality as just being completely insane, or crazy, useless people that need to be like restrained or locked away in some way because these people are trying to ruin society. Can't do that, man. So anyway, that's some thoughts. I guess pretty generic and rambling thoughts about the MBTI. But I wanted to talk about it a little, because since I finally did the official version, I just sort of had some thoughts on what my perspective was on it, and I continue to believe that there are flaws inherent in the indicator, as far as I believe actually observing people is a better way to find out their type, so to speak, than the type indicator actually is. Even the Kersey one, I know I've in a lot of ways I trumpet Kersey theory as being kind of the one that I get the most use out of. But even Kersey's temperament sorter has some of the same flaws, and some of the, like I said, some of them are kind of inherent in the fact that sensing type people, or the more concrete type people, are going to take questions more literally. They're not going to respond to the more metaphorical or hypothetical questions as well, because they're going to take them more literally. And SPs especially, when you ask them questions about new and exciting things, they're going to say they want to do that. When you say, do you want to do things the old boring way, then they're not going to say yes to that. And so it's almost like in the world of some of these intuitive written type indicators, SPs don't even really exist. I mean, you're either in or you're an SJ. That's the way they tend to sort of view it. SPs are just some sort of we're some sort of other being trapped in the void somewhere. So I'm here to try to represent, busting out of that void, and you're going to have to deal with us whether you like it or not. So that's my last thought on that for now. But I'm sure I'll have much more to say about these topics in the near future. But as always, subscribe, comment, give me your feedback. Video responses would be awesome, even if it's just text, whatever. I've gotten a lot of messages, and the next thing I'm going to do, believe me, is start responding to some of the messages I've gotten. I really have been meaning to do that, but there was just some things I kind of wanted to get off my chest before I got to that, and so I wanted to do this first. But haven't forgot about you if you sent me a message, and by all means, give me your feedback on this, your thoughts on the MBTI. Tell me if you've taken the actual official thing, and if so, what you got, and how you thought it jived with, what you already thought about yourself, or, your thoughts on that, anything about that. So let me know, and once again, as always, thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more exciting videos.